Now it's time to get to some week 5 previews and picks. We're going to be picking against the spread here. And we got to start off with the huge game in the SEC. This is, I believe, Kalen DeBoer's first SEC game here, but we got number 2, Georgia. They are favored by 1.5 points at number 4, Alabama. Over under on that is 48.5. These are teams that met in the SEC championship last year. I know that Georgia fans are still feeling the pain from that one. And Alabama, if I'm correct on this, has not been a home dog since 2007. So it's been a very long time since they play at home and are seen as an underdog. But Nicole, I want to get some of your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about this Alabama-Georgia game is that despite the fact that Georgia has been the gold standard in the sport for a number of years now, it still feels like I've got more questions about the Bulldogs than I do about Alabama at this point. And maybe that's a little bit unfair and an overreaction to a 1-point win over Kentucky, but there were just a lot of questions about like the offense stagnating in that game.
Mm-hmm.
It was the fewest total yards in a Georgia game since the opener in 2021 against Clemson. And it just felt like this year's team, like, what are they going to do when things are stalling out? You know, like, can you run the ball? Or, you know, you don't have a Brock Bowers, you don't have a Ladd McConkey. What do you do to get that jump started and to get it going? So I do have some questions about that. Whereas with Alabama, I weirdly feel like they're ahead of schedule. They have a brand new coach. It's the post Nick Saban era. And Jalen Milroe, I think, is really good. I think he's improving in the intermediate game. He's always had the deep ball capability. He's always had the athleticism. And so I just feel like despite their losses, they have been playing well. I know they've had some slow starts in some of these games, but once they turn it on, they really turn it on. And so I just like, what happens if it, you know, if Georgia needs to respond to one of those types of explosive plays like that? That's where I'm saying I have questions. I still think I'm going to take Georgia in this game because again, they just feel like they're the incumbent, right? Like they're the team that now is the standard. Even though this game is going to be in Tuscaloosa, I just think I have more questions that we're going to see answers to in this game about Georgia just because, you know, they had a clunker to come into this.
Yeah, I've got Georgia by a field goal in this one. I actually like the way that you laid that out in terms of questions, because when I look at this Georgia team, I think that they are great defensively. I think that they're just good on offense, right? Like I'm not exactly sure outside of Carson Beck that they have like a star-studded offense with, you know, talent, first-round talent littered everywhere. Just doesn't feel like that's this year. But you mentioned the slow starts, and as an Ohio State Buckeye, I watch them on Saturdays. My school has slow starts as well. It doesn't hurt you until it hurts you, and I think that could be a situation in this game where if Alabama does start off a little bit slow, certainly going to be a lot harder to get back into the game than it would be against USF, than it would be against Wisconsin, right? And so I think that's going to be one of the bigger deciding points of this game. It's about the start to me for Alabama. And if they do start off slow in this one, I think it becomes a lot tougher for them to win it.
How do you feel about Carson Beck so far? I know we just talked about Jalen Milroe. He's in my Heisman top 5. I mean, Carson Beck is someone who was right at the top of those lists in the preseason.
Yeah, so we've got the quarterback comparison up for the people who are watching here. As you can see, Jalen Milroe, very productive throwing the football, but also we've got it highlighted there. 6 rush touchdowns is ridiculous. Carson Beck's a first-round quarterback to me. I think he's got all of the tools. I like the way that he plays the game. Against Kentucky, he did not have a great game. It's college football. I think everybody is allowed to not have a great game. But I think that he is the least of their issues when I look offensively. You mentioned some of the players that they had in the past. I just don't think that he's throwing to the same caliber of guy. But he is not the problem for me when I look at Georgia and their offense. I think he's a first-round pick.
Yeah, and again, no interceptions for either of these quarterbacks. They've both been playing well enough for their teams to win. And again, they both come off buys heading into this game. It's a monster game, one of the top handful of games of the season. I also think Georgia edges them out. I don't know if it's a field goal, whatever it is, but they do cover that 1.5 points.